She sat at a Thanksgiving table, trembling hands gripping a pen, while her husband slid divorce papers in front of everyone. They laughed. Her tears fell onto the signature line. What they didn't know was that 5 days earlier, she had quietly saved their dying company with $100 million. And in 40 minutes, everything they owned would vanish. This is not a story about revenge. It's about dignity, about what happens when people mistake quietness for weakness and kindness for stupidity. It's about a woman who chose silence over spectacle, and in doing so, taught an entire family a lesson they would never forget. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Catherine Mills, though most people just called her Kathy. To her neighbors, she was the soft-spoken art teacher who ran a small studio on Maple Street, the kind of place tucked between a used bookstore and a coffee shop that still served coffee in actual mugs. She wore simple cardigans, drove a 10-year-old sedan, and never wore jewelry except for a thin silver watch that had belonged to her mother. She taught watercolor classes to retirees on Tuesday mornings and charcoal drawing to teenagers who couldn't afford the fancy art academies across town. Her studio smelled like linseed oil and rain, and there was always classical music playing softly in the background. People loved her for her gentleness, for the way she never raised her voice, for how she made everyone feel seen. What none of them knew, not her students, not her neighbors, not even the mailman who brought her packages every Thursday, was that Catherine Mills was worth over $300 million. She had built her fortune before turning 27, through strategic investments in emerging pharmaceutical companies and a keen eye for undervalued real estate in developing markets. By the time most people her age were still figuring out their careers, she had already sat on 3 corporate boards and turned down countless marriage proposals from men who saw her as a trophy. She had learned early that wealth attracted the wrong kind of attention. It brought people who wanted things from you, who calculated your value before they learned your name. So she made a choice. She stepped away from the boardrooms, kept her wealth hidden behind layers of trusts and offshore accounts, and built a life where people might actually love her for who she was, not what she had. That's when Michael walked into her studio. It was a rainy October evening, the kind where the sky turns purple before it turns dark, and most of her students had already gone home. She was cleaning paintbrushes in the back room when she heard the bell above the door chime. She walked out to find a tall man in a wet coat standing in front of one of her paintings, a landscape of the Oregon coast she had finished the week before. He wasn't looking at it the way most people did, with polite interest or casual appreciation. He was studying it, his head tilted slightly, his eyes moving across every brush stroke. "You captured the loneliness," he said without turning around. "Most people paint the ocean like it's majestic or powerful. You painted it like it's waiting for something." She felt something shift in her chest. "That's exactly what I was trying to show," she said quietly. He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and smiled. "I'm Michael," he said, "and I think I just found my new favorite artist." They talked for 2 hours that night. He told her about his job in logistics management, how he had just moved to town to help his family's struggling pharmaceutical distribution company. She told him about teaching, about her students, about why she loved art. She didn't tell him about the investment portfolios or the property holdings, or the fact that she could buy his family's company 10 times over without checking her account balance. She just told him about the parts of her life that felt real. By the time he left, they had plans to meet for coffee that weekend. 6 months later, he proposed in her tiny apartment, no cameras, no elaborate setup, just him on one knee with his grandmother's ring, asking if she would build a life with him. She said yes, knowing she was taking a risk, knowing that eventually she might have to tell him the truth. But for now, she wanted to be just Kathy, the art teacher who had fallen in love with a good man. The wedding was small, held in a garden behind a bed and breakfast, with 30 guests and wildflowers instead of roses. His family attended, though she noticed the way his mother looked at her dress, which had cost $75 from a department store, with barely concealed disappointment. His sister whispered something to his brother during the vows, and they both smirked. But Michael held her hand and looked at her like she was the only person in the world, and that was enough. That had to be enough. The problem started at the first Sunday dinner. Michael's family lived in a sprawling colonial house on the edge of town, the kind with a circular driveway and professionally maintained gardens. His mother, Patricia, greeted her at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Catherine, darling, come in. We're so glad Michael found someone who makes him happy." The emphasis on someone felt deliberate, but Catherine ignored it. The dining room table was set with china that probably cost more than most people's cars, and everyone was already seated. Michael's father, Richard, barely looked up from his phone. His sister, Amanda, was scrolling through social media, while her husband James talked loudly about a golf game. Michael's brother David arrived late, breezing in with apologies and an expensive watch that caught the light. The interrogation started before the salad was served. "So, Catherine, what is it you do again?" Patricia asked, her tone sweet as poison. "I teach art classes," Catherine said simply, "at a little studio downtown." "How quaint," Amanda said, not looking up from her phone. "Michael mentioned you teach children? That must be so fulfilling." The word fulfilling sounded like an insult. "It is," Catherine said. "I love watching people discover their creativity." "And it pays well?" David asked, grinning. "Enough," Catherine said. "I live simply." "Well, we're just glad Michael is supporting you," Patricia said. "It's important for a man to be able to provide for his wife." Michael squeezed her hand under the table but said nothing. She noticed that. She noticed how he changed around his family, became quieter, smaller, less like the man who had studied her painting in the rain. The dinners became a weekly tradition, and each one was worse than the last. They asked intrusive questions about when she would give them grandchildren, made jokes about her clothes, suggested she should try harder with her appearance. Amanda once brought a fashion magazine to dinner and left it open to an article about dressing for your husband's social status. "Just some light reading," she said, with a smile. David made comments about how lucky she was to have married into a family with connections, with real business experience, with old money. "Not everyone gets a chance like this," he said once, his voice dripping with condescension. And through it all, Michael stayed silent. He held her hand. He kissed her forehead. He told her he loved her. But he never defended her. Not once. "They don't mean anything by it," he would say later, in the car ride home. "That's just how they are. They'll warm up to you eventually." But they didn't. If anything, they got worse. 2 years passed like this. 2 years of Sunday dinners that felt like endurance tests. Of holidays where she was seated at the far end of the table. Of family photos where Patricia would suggest she stand in the back since she's taller. 2 years of smiling through gritted teeth while they made jokes about her secondhand furniture and her simple lifestyle. 2 years of Michael promising it would get better while doing nothing to make it better. And then everything changed. She found out by accident. She was cleaning Michael's home office one Saturday while he was at the gym, organizing papers that had piled up on his desk, when she found a folder marked Confidential. Sterling Pharmaceuticals. Sterling Pharmaceuticals was the family company, the source of all their wealth and pride. The business that Richard and Patricia never stopped talking about. Catherine almost put the folder back, but something made her open it. What she found inside made her blood run cold. The company was dying. Massive debt, failed product launches, mismanaged contracts, regulatory violations that had cost them millions in fines. They had 6 months, maybe less, before complete collapse. The documents showed desperate attempts to secure loans, all rejected. Letters from creditors demanding payment. Internal memos about potential bankruptcy. They were finished. She sat at Michael's desk for a long time, staring at the numbers, doing the math in her head. The company needed a minimum of $80 million to survive. Probably closer to $100 million to actually recover and restructure. Without it, Sterling Pharmaceuticals would go under, taking the family's wealth, their home, their entire lifestyle with it. And the worst part? The company employed over 300 people. Families who had nothing to do with the Ashford family's arrogance and mismanagement. People who would lose their jobs, their health insurance, their livelihoods, because Richard and Patricia had made bad decisions for years and refused to admit it. That night, Catherine made a phone call to her financial advisor, Marcus Chen, a man who had managed her investments for over a decade and was one of the few people who knew the truth about her wealth. "Marcus, I need you to set up an anonymous investment vehicle," she said. "I want to inject $100 million into Sterling Pharmaceuticals." There was a long silence on the other end. "Catherine, are you serious? That's your family's company. They've been treating you like dirt for 2 years. "I'm not doing it for them," she said quietly. "I'm doing it for the 300 employees who don't deserve to suffer because of their boss's incompetence. And I'm doing it to see something." "See what?" Marcus asked. "The truth," she said. "I want to see how they treat someone they think is beneath them, someone they think they have power over." She had Marcus structure the deal carefully. An anonymous investor would provide $100 million in exchange for a modest monthly payment of $1,000 and a non-voting minority stake in the company. The payment was deliberately small, almost insulting, a fraction of what the investment was worth. But it came with one condition. The deal would remain confidential, and the investor's identity would never be revealed unless the investor chose to reveal it. The money was wired on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Sterling Pharmaceuticals had been saved. The company announced a mysterious benefactor had stepped in at the last moment. providing crucial funding to restructure and continue operations. Richard called an emergency family meeting that night. Catherine sat at that family meeting, watching them celebrate their salvation. Patricia was practically glowing, talking about how she always knew things would work out, how the universe rewards good people. Richard was already making plans to expand operations, talking about new product lines and market opportunities. Amanda and David were congratulating their parents, toasting with expensive wine that Catherine knew they couldn't actually afford anymore without that anonymous investment. "Who do you think it was?" Amanda asked. "Someone smart enough to recognize a good opportunity," Richard said confidently. "They're getting a steal at these terms. $1,000 a month? They clearly don't understand business. We'll pay them their little allowance and maintain complete control." Michael squeezed Catherine's hand under the table and she squeezed back, saying nothing. Over the following weeks, she watched how they talked about their mysterious investor. They mocked the monthly payment amount. Imagine being so desperate for money that you accept $1,000 a month for a $100 million investment. David laughed during one dinner. "They must be some small-time player who got lucky and doesn't know what to do with money." Patricia agreed. Probably new money. No real understanding of business or breeding, just someone trying to feel important. They made jokes about how they had taken advantage of a fool, how they had secured their future while giving away nothing of real value. They never once expressed gratitude. They never acknowledged that someone had saved 300 jobs. They just saw it as their due, as the universe correcting itself because they deserved to win. And through all of this, Catherine said nothing. She sat at their dinners, endured their comments about her clothes and her career, listened to them mock the person who had saved them, which was her, and she gathered information. She watched how they treated people they thought had no power. She saw their true nature, stripped of pretense. She learned everything she needed to know. 5 months after the investment, things started to change in small ways. Michael became more distant. He spent longer hours at the office, came home later, seemed distracted during conversations. She noticed him texting at odd hours, saw him smile at his phone in ways he used to smile at her. When she asked if everything was okay, he always said yes, just stressed about work, nothing to worry about. But she knew. Women always know. She didn't confront him. She didn't check his phone or hire a private investigator. She just watched and waited and felt something inside her grow cold and quiet. The final confirmation came from Amanda, of all people. They were at a family barbecue, one of those mandatory summer gatherings where everyone pretended to be happy. Amanda cornered her by the dessert table, wine glass in hand, eyes bright with malice. "You know he's not happy, right?" Amanda said casually. "Michael, he's not happy with you." Catherine kept her face neutral. "What makes you say that?" "Oh, come on," Amanda laughed. "It's obvious. You're not right for this family. You never were. You don't fit. And honestly, we've all been waiting for him to realize it." The Thanksgiving invitation came 3 weeks later. Patricia called Catherine directly, which was unusual. "Darling, we're having a special family Thanksgiving this year. Very important. We need everyone there. 6 o'clock sharp. Dress nicely." There was something in her tone, something that made Catherine's instincts flare. But she agreed. She spent that Thanksgiving morning teaching a free art class to underprivileged kids at a community center, something she did every major holiday. She helped a 7-year-old girl mix the perfect shade of purple, watched a teenage boy discover he could actually draw, felt the pure joy of creating something from nothing. Then she went home, showered, put on a simple navy dress, and drove to the Ashford house. The dining room was decorated like something from a magazine. White linen tablecloth, crystal glasses, candles everywhere. The whole family was already seated, which was strange because she wasn't late. They were waiting for her. Michael stood when she entered, but he didn't smile. His face was pale, nervous, like a man about to do something terrible. "Catherine," Patricia said warmly, "please sit down, right here." She indicated the chair at the end of the table, isolated from everyone else. Catherine sat. Richard poured wine. Amanda and David exchanged glances. The room felt wrong, charged with an energy she couldn't name. They made small talk for exactly 10 minutes. Then, Michael stood up. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. He walked to where Catherine sat and placed it on the table in front of her, right next to her untouched plate. "What is this?" she asked quietly. "Divorce papers," he said. His voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry, Catherine. This isn't working. We're not working. You're not the right fit for this family, for my life. I need someone who understands my world, who can match my ambitions, You're a wonderful person, but we want different things. The room was completely silent except for the soft crackle of candles. Catherine stared at the envelope, her vision blurring with tears. You're doing this here? She whispered. In front of everyone? On Thanksgiving? It's better this way, Patricia said, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. Clean break, family support. We'll help Michael through this difficult time. Then David laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that cut through the room. Amanda joined in, covering her mouth like she was trying to stop but couldn't. Then James. Then Patricia, a high tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Even Richard was smiling, shaking his head like this was all so predictable, so expected. They were laughing at her pain, her humiliation, her tears that were falling onto the divorce papers, smudging the ink. We gave you 2 years, Amanda said through her laughter. 2 years to prove you belonged, but you never did. You're just a simple art teacher. What did you think would happen? You should be grateful, honestly, David added. You got to live a nice life for a while. Play pretend. Now you can go back to your little studio and your little life. Michael said nothing. He just stood there, looking at the floor, his hands in his pockets, while his family destroyed her. Catherine's hands were shaking as she picked up the pen. Her tears fell steadily now, quiet and unstoppable. She looked at Michael one last time, searching his face for any sign of the man who had stood in her studio in the rain, who had seen loneliness in a painting and understood it. But that man was gone. Or maybe he had never really existed. She signed her name, Catherine Mills. The signature was shaky but legible. There, she said softly. It's done. Patricia actually clapped. Wonderful. Now we can all move forward. Michael, darling, we should call Jennifer. You remember Jennifer from the club? Her father owns that medical device company. She would be perfect for you. Catherine stood up slowly, carefully, like someone who had been injured and was testing if they could still walk. She pulled out her phone and sent a single text message to Marcus Chen. Just 2 words. Come now. What are you doing? Michael asked, noticing. Calling a car, she said quietly. I'll need a ride since I assume you'll want your house key back. She placed the key on the table. They went back to talking among themselves, already forgetting about her, planning Michael's future with someone more suitable. Someone who knew which fork to use at formal dinners and how to network at charity galas. Catherine stood by the window, watching the driveway, waiting. 38 minutes later, headlights appeared. 3 cars pulled into the circular driveway. Expensive cars, the kind that made Richard look up from his wine glass with interest. Who's that? He asked. Catherine said nothing. The doorbell rang. Patricia stood, smoothing her dress, probably thinking it was guests joining their celebration. She opened the door to find 3 people in impeccable business attire. A man in his 50s with silver hair, a woman in her 40s carrying a leather briefcase, and Marcus Chen, Catherine's financial advisor, holding a tablet. Can I help you? Patricia asked, confused. All 3 of them looked past her, directly at Catherine, and bowed. Not a small nod. A full, respectful bow. Boss, Marcus said clearly, we came as requested. The word hung in the air like smoke. Boss. Patricia's smile froze. Richard stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Michael's face went white. What is this? Amanda demanded. Some kind of joke? Catherine walked to the door, her tears dried now, her face calm. Patricia, Richard, this is Marcus Chen, my senior financial advisor. This is Dorothy Williams, my chief legal counsel. And this is Thomas Bradford, my corporate restructuring specialist. The silence was so complete that everyone could hear their own breathing. You're what? Michael said weakly. Catherine turned to face the room. These people who had spent 2 years making her feel small, who had just laughed while her heart broke. My team, she said simply, the people who helped me manage my assets, my $300 million in assets, give or take. She watched the words hit them like physical blows. David actually stumbled backward. Amanda's mouth opened and closed without sound. Patricia gripped the doorframe. That's impossible, Richard said, but his voice had no conviction. Marcus, please show them, Catherine said quietly. Marcus stepped forward with his tablet, turning it so they could see the screen. He pulled up documents, account statements, property deeds, investment portfolios, real estate holdings across 4 continents, pharmaceutical company shares, including a controlling interest in 2 of Sterling's biggest competitors, art collections worth tens of millions. The numbers kept scrolling. Ms. Mills has been managing her wealth privately for over a decade, Marcus said in his professional tone. She prefers to live modestly and separate her personal life from her financial activities. She's been quite successful at maintaining her privacy, until now. Wait, Michael said, his voice breaking. You've been rich this whole time? The studio, the classes, the clothes, all of it was fake? No, Catherine said firmly. That was the only real part. The studio is mine because I love teaching. The clothes are simple because I don't need to impress anyone. That life was true. This. She gestured at the Ashford house at them. This was the fake part. Me pretending that your cruelty was acceptable because I loved you. She turned to Richard and Patricia. Do you want to know something interesting? 5 months ago, your company was dying. You had maybe 6 weeks before bankruptcy. Someone gave you $100 million and saved you. Do you remember? Patricia's face had gone gray. The anonymous investor, she whispered. That was you? That was me, Catherine confirmed. I saved Sterling Pharmaceuticals. Not because you deserved it, but because 300 innocent people worked there. People with families and mortgages and lives that mattered more than your pride. I gave you the money to save them. And in return, I asked for $1,000 a month. But why? Richard asked, his voice barely audible. To see, Catherine said simply, to see how you would treat someone you thought had no power, someone you believed was desperate and stupid. And you mocked me. You laughed at the investor who saved you. You called them a fool. You took my money and felt superior while doing it. She pulled out her phone and showed them another message thread, this one with her legal team. As of 15 minutes ago, I have initiated the withdrawal clause in the investment contract. It's a clause my lawyers included specifically for situations involving fraud or bad faith dealing. Mocking your primary investor while lying about the company's true financial situation to that investor definitely qualifies. You can't, David said desperately. You'll destroy the company. Yes, Catherine said calmly. I will. Sterling Pharmaceuticals will collapse within the week without that funding. But don't worry about the employees. I've already arranged for a competitor to acquire the company's assets and retain all current staff at better salaries. They'll be fine. Better than fine. They'll finally work for people who appreciate them. She turned to Michael, who looked like he might be sick. As for the divorce, I'll make this very simple. You can keep the house. Keep the car. Keep whatever's in your accounts. I don't want any of it. I never did. Catherine, please, he said, reaching for her. I didn't know. If I had known, you would have what? She interrupted. Treated me with basic human respect? Defended me when your family attacked me? Loved me for who I was instead of what I had? She stepped back from his reaching hand. I didn't tell you about the money because I wanted to be loved for myself. And you showed me exactly how much that version of me was worth to you. You showed me tonight, in front of everyone, with divorce papers on Thanksgiving. She looked at all of them one last time. These people who had made her feel worthless while she quietly held their entire world in her hands. I hope you learned something from this, she said. But I doubt you will. Catherine walked out of that house and never looked back. The withdrawal of funds happened exactly as she had promised. Sterling Pharmaceuticals collapsed within 5 days. The bankruptcy was swift and brutal, covered extensively in the business press as a cautionary tale about mismanagement and arrogance. Richard and Patricia lost the house, the cars, their entire lifestyle. They had to move to a modest apartment across town, the kind of place Catherine would have happily lived in, but they found humiliating. Amanda and David, who had relied on family money for their own lifestyles, had to actually work for a living, taking positions at companies where they had no special status, no automatic respect. Michael lost everything except his personal savings, which amounted to about $40,000, barely enough to rent a decent apartment. He tried calling Catherine 137 times in the first week. She never answered. The employees of Sterling Pharmaceuticals were acquired by Harrison Medical, a company that had been on Catherine's radar for ethical business practices. They received raises, better benefits, and actual job security. She made sure of that. Marcus leaked the story to a few trusted journalists, not for revenge, but because the truth deserved to be told. Within a month, everyone knew. Catherine Mills, the humble art teacher, was actually one of the region's wealthiest individuals, a woman who had chosen poverty over pretense, who had saved a company while being mocked by its owners, who had walked away from people who never deserved her. The media attention was intense, but brief. Catherine gave exactly one interview to a respected business journalist who had covered ethical investing for decades. Why did you hide your wealth? The journalist asked. Because I wanted to know if anyone could love me without it, Catherine said simply. And I learned that the people who mattered least cared the most about money, while the people who mattered most never cared at all. She meant her students, the 7-year-old who mixed purple paint, the teenager learning to draw, the retirees finding joy in watercolors. They had loved her exactly as she was. They still did. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, Catherine opened a new studio. This one was bigger, brighter, in a beautiful historic building she had purchased and restored. She offered free classes to anyone who wanted to learn, funded by an endowment that would last generations. She hired 3 other teachers, all people who loved art more than money, who understood that creativity was about expression, not profit. She lived openly now, not hiding her wealth but not flaunting it either. She drove a nice car because she wanted to, wore beautiful clothes when they made her happy, donated millions to causes she believed in. She stopped shrinking herself to make other people comfortable. She stopped pretending that cruelty was acceptable if wrapped in family loyalty. Michael sent her a letter, 8 months after the divorce was finalized. It was 12 pages long, handwritten, full of apologies and explanations, and desperate attempts to justify his actions. He said he had been weak, that he had let his family influence him too much, that he had made a terrible mistake. He said he had loved her, that he still loved her, that he would spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to her if she would just give him another chance. Catherine read the letter once, then put it in a drawer. She didn't respond. Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired, and some people don't deserve the chance to try. 1 year after that Thanksgiving, Catherine was teaching an evening watercolor class when a young woman came into the studio. She was probably 25, dressed in expensive clothes, carrying herself with the kind of confidence that came from privilege. "Are you Catherine Mills?" she asked. "I am," Catherine said. "Can I help you?" The woman looked around the studio, at the students bent over their work, at the paint-splattered tables, and the afternoon light streaming through old windows. "I'm getting married," she said, "to a man whose family has money. Old money. And they've been treating me like I'm not good enough, like I need to prove myself worthy of their name." Catherine put down her paintbrush and gave the young woman her full attention. "And what do you want from me?" The woman took a deep breath. "I want to know if I should tell them the truth. My father owns 3 tech companies. I'm worth more than their entire family combined. Should I tell them? Should I make them see?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, thinking about candlelight and laughter, about tears falling on divorce papers, about the weight of secrets and the cost of truth. "Only you can answer that," she finally said. "But I'll tell you what I learned. The truth reveals people. It shows you who they are when they think you have nothing they want. And once you know that, you can never unknow it." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "They're awful to me," she whispered. "His mother, his sister, they make these little comments, these jokes that aren't really jokes, and he just lets them. He says they'll warm up to me, but it's been a year and they're getting worse." "Then you already know the answer," Catherine said gently. "It's not about the money, it's about respect. It's about being with someone who will stand beside you, not behind their family. The money just makes it easier to walk away." "Is that what you did?" the woman asked. "You walked away?" "Yes," Catherine said. "And it was the best decision I ever made, because the people who love you for who you are will never need to see your bank account. And the people who need to see your bank account will never truly love you." The young woman left with tears streaming down her face, but Catherine thought they might be the kind of tears that came before freedom. She went back to her class, helping an elderly man figure out how to paint water so it actually looked wet, laughing with a middle-aged woman who had just accidentally created the perfect shade of sunset orange. These people knew her wealth now, everyone did, but they treated her exactly the same as before, because she was still the same person. The money had never been who she was. It was just something she had. So now we ask you, what would you have done in Catherine's place? Would you have revealed the truth earlier? Or would you have let them show their true nature, like she did? Do you believe that people reveal who they really are when they think you have no power, when they think they're safe to show their worst selves? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, and we want to know how this story made you feel. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever realized that someone you loved didn't actually respect you? How did you handle it? What did you learn? Share your story with us. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about dignity and silence and the quiet power of knowing your worth, subscribe for more stories about life, respect, and the consequences of treating people like they don't matter. Because here's the truth that Catherine learned, and that we all need to remember: the people you underestimate today might be the ones who decide your fate tomorrow. The person you mock might be the one holding your future in their hands. And kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost everything. Catherine still teaches every Tuesday and Thursday. She still drinks coffee in actual mugs and wears comfortable cardigans, and helps children discover that they can create beauty from nothing. But now she does it without apology, without shrinking, without pretending to be less than she is to make others comfortable. She learned that the greatest power is not in the money you have, but in the knowledge of when to walk away from people who will never appreciate you. She learned that silence can be stronger than shouting, that dignity matters more than revenge, and that sometimes the best response to cruelty is simply to remove yourself from people who don't deserve your presence. And perhaps most importantly, she learned that the right people will love you exactly as you are, while the wrong people will never love you enough, no matter what you do or what you have. The question is, are you brave enough to walk away from the wrong people to find the right ones?